Julieta, thank you so very, very much. I've got the great, great pleasure to now introduce our next speaker, John Akomfrah. Born in Accra, Ghana, John is best known for his work with the London-based media workshop Black Audio Film Collective, which he co-founded in 1982 with the objectives of addressing issues of Black British identity and developing media forms appropriate to this subject matter. Akomfrah's work takes a deliberately questioning approach to documentary. His many, many films include Testament, 1988, 7 Songs for Malcolm X in 1993, Martin Luther King, Days of Hope in 1997, and The Wonderful World of Louis Armstrong in 1999. John will discuss some of the themes of his 2 recent pieces, the cinema piece, The Nine Muses, and the gallery piece, Mnemosyne, and will connect them to mapping via migration and via memory. A very warm welcome to John Akomfrah.
Folks, thank you very much for inviting me. I suspect you've probably heard a lot of talk, so what I really want to do is to show you something, okay, and then talk about it. This is I'm going to show you an excerpt, and I'm not sure how much I'll show, I'll just watch and see, from a gallery piece that I did at the beginning of the year called Mnemosyne. And the piece came out of an invitation from the Arts Council and the BBC to visit the BBC's archive and to try and make something from the material in the archive. So this was one of the results. The second, The Nine Muses, is playing tonight, which is why I'm slightly anxious, at the London Film Festival, so I'll have to rush off in a minute. But so I'll show you the piece from Mnemosyne, and then I'll talk to you about it. Okay, so if you could just play the piece, please, sir.
Sometimes we think we shouldn't blame the people because it's we who have come to their country. On the other hand, we think, well, if they in the first place had not come to our country and have spread a false propaganda, we would never have come to theirs. If we had not come, we would none be the wiser. We would still have the good image of England, thinking that they are what they are not. And the English would be ignorant of us.
of man's first disobedience, and the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose mortal taste brought death into the world and all our woe. With loss of Eden, till one greater man restore us and regain the blissful seat. Sing, heavenly muse, that on the secret top of Oreb or of Sinai didst inspire that shepherd who first taught the chosen seed in the beginning how the heavens and earth rose out of chaos. Say first, what cause moved our grandparents in that happy state, favored of heaven so highly, to fall off from their Creator and transgress his will for one restraint, lords of the world besides? Who first seduced them to that foul revolt? The infernal serpent. He it was whose guile stirred up with envy and revenge, deceived the mother of mankind. What time his pride had cast him out from heaven, with all his host of rebel angels, by whose aid aspiring to set himself in glory above his peers, he trusted to have equaled the Most High, if he opposed. And with ambitious aim against the throne and monarchy of God, raised impious war in heaven, and battle proud with vain attempt. Him the almighty power hurled headlong flaming from the ethereal sky, with hideous ruin and combustion down to bottomless perdition, there to dwell in adamantine chains and penal fire, who durst defy the omnipotent to arms.
The beginning of this project started with a paradox, and I think it's a paradox that in a way overdetermines and maps all migrant lives or post-migrant lives. Because essentially, post-migrant identities exist in a space in which there are very few lines, indications, memorials, epitaphs to either their being in situ, in place, or ever have been in place. To be a post-migrant figure is to accept that you live essentially in a cultural terrain in which you will, on the whole, have very little left of your subjectivity when you've gone. So that if you go looking around London, if you go looking in the places where lives are memorialized, there's effectively nothing for immigrants who came to this country, even though millions and millions and millions of them have come here, done their bit, and gone off and died. At the same time, and this is where the paradox lies, at the same time, there are quite a lot of information about who these immigrants are. Except on the whole, it very rarely talks about them. It's usually about what they mean for a culture. You know, they are laborers or housing problems or health problems or criminal problems or housing problems. Very little normally about them. And what you get, what you get if you are a product of this conjunction of imponderables is another map for yourself as a post-migrant figure. You are told by the official institutions, schools that you pass through, that this is what you are, and you're told at home or in your family that this is what you are. And what I wanted to try and do with this project is to find a way in which the two might talk to each other. The official language of post-migrant arrival and the unofficial discourse, if you like, that the post-migrant either produces or is handed by the institutions that they create. And the idea was to try and construct a kind of counter-cartography of post-war modernity. A counter-cartography in which the archival material that exists, which is in a way the official history, the official memory of post-war Britain, could be somehow forced to say something about black subjectivities, Asian identities, post-migrant desires, blah, 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 blah. In other words, the attempt that I wanted to make with this project was to try and suggest an alternative archaeology of desire through which one could begin to grant legitimacy to subjects that are supposed to exist outside of desire, since they are really economic subjects or criminal subjects. Desire is not something that's supposed to over-determine their identities. We spent about 6 months trying to do this. And in that process, you invest in another idea of the map. Because when I went into the archive, I had one idea, which is I'm going to look at material around Birmingham and about migration to Birmingham between 1955 and 1965. Other than that, I wanted the material itself to suggest the map by which I used to travel. So what we would do is look at stuff around factory work, and occasionally, as you look at stuff, you would, for instance, think, oh, I wonder where these people would live when they leave the factory. On the basis of that, I would then go and look at archival material on housing. And as you look at housing, you can see sometimes people eating, or sometimes kids getting ready to go to school. And I think, oh, okay, well, maybe schooling or education might be a good way to go to look at more stuff. So the idea was not to go to it in a way that a conventional documentary might, which is to go to the archive in order to find means and material to illustrate the thesis, but to allow the material itself to suggest the navigational routes by which one could go through the official archives of both the BBC and ITV. And as I did that, you suddenly realize that in a way, all archives have a version of memory. All archives have a version of desire. All archives have a kind of picture of legitimacy. And when you encounter the thing that's going to work for you, it usually sits on the outskirts of all of these versions. It usually doesn't have a place. So most of the time, all of, bar maybe 2 or 3 images that I found, I arrived at completely by accident, which is also why we couldn't have a prescribed map. You know, if you said, I want images of black people at work, for instance, there is no category in the archive for that. If you say, I want images of black people going to school, there is no category for that. So, in a way, what you have to do is to trick the archive into renouncing its versions of the 3 things I'm talking about, its versions of legitimacy, desire, and so on, to yield something else. So you say, okay, I want something on education in Birmingham. And as you watch it, sometimes there will be just a fleeting glimpse of a black child on the edge of frame, you know, or I want something about work. And if you're really lucky, when they stop talking to the trade union official, because really the piece is about trade union unrest, let's say in Birmingham 1960s. If you're really lucky, when they stop talking to the official, who is invariably white, who would probably say something like, the workers are really very angry, they're not getting enough money, so they want to go on strike. Okay? There will be a piece that they've shot which would be to illustrate this argument. And if you look at it, there might be. So everything that we ended up using came through this way. And it's only right that it should come through this way. My time is up. Thank you for listening. Take care.